Grant back with another episode of Thinking in Circles. Today we're going to be talking about the Myth of Mithras, and I just want to prefix this whole lesson by basically saying that there was a video that I made on 8/2/22. 8/2/2022, and it's basically an analysis of the Heddernheim Relief, in which there are many iconographies of Mithras depicted, and I basically go over this whole myth in a very, very detailed and contracted form, you can say. And I'm pretty sure that if you guys check that video up, if you have no prior knowledge on this subject, you'll find that you'll be able to be really informed, pre-informed before getting into this lecture topic. But nevertheless, if you're just like, hey, you're gung-ho and you want to hop in, let's go ahead and do it, because it's going to be very informative in actually showing the transformation of God image and also transformation of libido image of the imagery, basically the meaning of the imagery, what the energy transforms into, and how you can apply this formula to your own personal journey of becoming and of integration of shadow contents, you see. So nevertheless, I'm going to start reading here and hope you enjoy. So this myth basically can be boiled down to the Four of Wands, which is basically a minor arcana card, which is the third decan of Aries, and that basically corresponds to April 11th through 20th. Keep in mind before I continue reading that April 11th through 20th, right, especially April 20th, just in particular, is the black line basically before Aries turns into Taurus. And if you look at the iconography of the Tauroctony, you'll see basically that, you have Aries being Mithras in a large way, and the Taurus basically being the bull. So you can see these elements within the Four of Wands, and I'm approaching tarot here because even Carl Jung stated that the tarot is good to use as a system of archetypes. You see what I'm saying? So now the Four of Wands is the third decan of Aries, April 11th through 20th, and is interlinked astrologically to the constellation of Perseus, who holds the caput Medusae, which is the head of Medusa, and is the mythologized Greek hero who was also syncretized with Mithras, thus the Persianized name of Perseus, okay? You can hear the word Persian in there, all right? Four of Wands happens to be astrologically and planetarily Venus in Aries. And this configuration entails the power of desire, its transformative potentials, its seductive attractions, and in parentheses I put here to explain the seductive attractions and the power of desire, etc., right? The symbols of that are the dove of Venus, Astarte, and Aphrodite, and also the Holy Spirit. So the dove basically symbolizes all three of the deities I named there, right? And the energy of war, strife, and contention, which correspond to Aries, okay? And you have to keep in mind too, Eris, which was a female version, if you will, of Aries, was the goddess of strife, okay? And the energies of strife and love are what come together to make the energy of the conjunctio. Okay, this is the reason why we basically project our inner worth on certain things that we want to make our own, certain things that we want to destroy so we can be at one with our life in the world and without that other faction being there. And then also great goals, great opuses and works that we're trying to achieve in our lives. This is what the conjunctio urge is consistent of, okay? So These two factors, along with the just goadings towards a magnum opus or great work, summarize the agents of the conjunctio, which is the experience of unity by all means, or the joining of the opposites, the conjunctio urge, right? This urge, in this day and time, in all of our lives to some extent, is being directly tied to the oft misguided and misdirected pursuits of the libido. It's all for something when we realize, what we have here in the story then is the underlying machinations of a system that sheds light on / explains the inner workings of the self-sacrificial rites of the Eucharist, communion, the Heros Gamos, which is the holy marriage mystery, and more. And all of this is seen and explained through the lenses of the religious cult that was known as Mithraism, which is basically rooted in ancient Persian cosmology and religion. So we're basically going to get into this, and I hope you guys enjoy. So let's just do this and prepare ourselves for a look into the Mithraic mysteries that shed light upon the equation of energy and eternal time and space by uncovering their archetypal traces found within the Mithraic mysteries. All right, let's do it. Okay, so before we get into the reading, I'm just going to give you some notable authors on the subject of Mithraism, because I've read most of the books I'm going to name here. I've read most of the books from the authors, just besides the books I'm going to name here, but these books are directly on this topic. So if you want to get more, I would suggest reading these books, right, by these authors. So the first one is Payam Nabars, and his book is The Mysteries of Mithras, the pagan belief that shaped the Christian world and that was written in 2005. You also have Franz Cumont, author of The Mysteries of Mithra. He basically provides you with some sometimes very dry historical looks at Mithraism, yet this information comes with enough background data to supply anyone who is interested with the ability to form their own solid conclusions on the subject, and also find out where they stand within the idea, given what data that archaeologists have been able to uncover and release to the public. The next author is Jason Reza Georgiani, all over YouTube, okay? And his website is https:// Jason Reza Georgiani, and the spelling to that I'll put in the links. That way you guys can link to these books pretty quickly. But he has various books and YouTube lectures on the topic of Zoroastrianism in its link with Mithraism, which is approached from a historic and religious standpoint. Edward F. Edinger is the next author, and the book reference below will supply you with a firm understanding of the alchemical and psychological understanding of the personage and myth of Mithras, and will leave you with some practical applications of the many formulae that arise from the many arcane configurations that the myth of Mithras exposes via the imagery that its adherents left behind. Symbols of Transformation is one of Jung's major works. Originally published in 1912, it was extensively revised and expanded in the 1952 edition to incorporate Jung's later mature understanding of the psyche. This work in its first edition heralded the irreversible split between Jung and Freud's personalistic psychology. Edward Edinger's Transformation of Libido, this is the name of the book, okay, goes straight to the heart of Jung's early thinking and lays bare the essence of his major pioneering concepts. His interpretive clarity and incisive understanding of Jung's ideas provide an invaluable resource in comprehending this seminal volume. So let's get into the next page here. Now, what I'm going to do is give you guys an overlay, and I called the overlay The Myth of Mithras, Relational Outline and Psychological Significance. And basically what you're going to see in triads are the posts of the myth as I am going to give it here and explain it, okay? And you can basically look on the left side of each of these triads and the right side of each of these triads to get an understanding of what they sum up, okay? And you're basically, as you look at the triads, you're basically going to see that one triad leads to another triad that is connected to other things, that leads to another triad, and into the culmination of the transformation into Aeon, Chronos, Zervan, etc. And then you have the globe of the earth, or the physical body, the illusory physical envelope that all of these are going to link to. And I basically put together this diagram to make the whole of this information a whole lot easier for you to ingest and understand. And I will be periodically throwing this information up on the screen. That way you guys can follow along with where we're at in the whole process. All right. All right, now to jump right straight into it, okay? In the first scene, Mithras, the hero, is born out of the maternal tree. This is not so different from the star that people hang on top of the Christmas tree. It is actually the same idea, the son being born out of the tree, okay? And let's keep in mind too, because I'm going to say it a few other times, but I need you to be on point with me on the symbolic attributes. Now, a tree is a libido symbol, and it is also a mother symbol. And also keep in mind, Mithras is a libido symbol, as he's linked to the sun. He's a hero. Hero is always libido energy. It's the energy of the hero, okay? So we've just gone over the first portion of the stages that we're going to go through in the myth. Okay, now the second scene, Mithras is carrying the bull. He has already overcome the bull, and now the theme is called the transitus, the carrying across. The same image came up in the Samson legend when Samson carried some gateposts from one city to another. It is an image of the overcoming of the primordial masculine instincts, and also the overcoming of the primitive father, the masculine instincts of the bull through consciousness, you know? And that has a lot to say also too, because of the father aspect. I mean, when you see, when a male sees males in his dreams, and, you know, you can reverse this if you're a woman, right? When a male sees males in his dreams, a lot of times this is a representation of the shadow, especially if it's a dark, evil male. And I don't mean dark, skin wise, but just the air of what it is that the individual is doing, or the energy that the individual has. So there's the ability to locate this evil within yourself, which is comic energy. It's basically animal desire, and it's personified by the shadow, or via the shadow. It's personified, and is usually seen in dreams in this nature. It's going to tell you what your energy output is going to be following. You know what I mean? Basically what your ego is going to be attaching itself to throughout your day, the way you're going to see things, the way certain situations in your life as you go through them are going to be tainted for the certain period that the dream is speaking about. So this is the identification of what that is. Now, this is the thing, the fact that you're identifying it, this is also a sublimatio. This is rising above the situation and being able to look and call it out. And when you're able to call it out, you're actually conscious of it. Now you're able to take it further into the process, okay? So we're going to now get into the third scene. Okay, in the third scene, Mithras, having achieved self-mastery, and this is after the sacrifice of the bull, okay? He presumes to take Sol's crown off his head and put it on his own, okay? And that seems like such a presumptuous thing to do, but if you think about it, the ego and the self are really one, because you can even look at that easily and explain it through the lens of Christian ideology, and that is by when Christ says, "I and my Father are one." Christ represents the self made flesh, or God made flesh, in a way for human beings to touch, to feel, to understand, to see, to observe. You see what I'm saying? But this was an extension of the one. You see, this is God basically as Christ in the Christian theology represents an extension of the Father. And that's why he was also called the second Adam. Okay. So continuing forward here, we're going to go to the fourth scene. In the fourth scene, Sol kneels before Mithras. So there's basically a pretty much a handshake. There's basically a passing off of an understanding between what one would think is the greater and what one would think is the lesser. Because actually you have to keep in mind, while Mithras is represented anthropomorphically as a human, okay, he is also a god, okay? And being a god is kind of like being the highest deity son, the son of God in a way. So you see some of the relics of Christianity within the Mithraic myth, and it just so happens that Christianity came right after the Mithraic myths came in and had been around for a long time in Rome, and they basically got stamped out into oblivion. I'm talking about the Mithraists by the Christians, and the Christians basically went on taking from the old pagan religions, and it's safe to say because of all the congruencies and the way that things go together within the structures of both mythologies, Christian mythologies, Mithraic mythologies, that they did borrow. They did borrow copiously, okay? Because once you know this myth, you can basically look at the dogma of Christianity. You can read the Bible, especially the New Testament, and understand what is being said in a new light, and in a light that it's like, wow, dude, why didn't I see this? Was here right in front of my face the whole time, you know? And it's because you just didn't have the keys to understand it. And this is what I'm going to endeavor to give you here, okay? So in the fourth scene, Sol then kneels before Mithras, right? So this pass-off we talked about. In psychological terms, this is a remarkable, indeed an awesome image of the deification of ego consciousness. And this kind of lets you know what ego consciousness really is. We take it for granted and we look at it as something so low and just kill the ego, do away with it. But it's like, no, this is something that through transformation, you can make yourself more powerful, okay? Now, this is the image of the deification of ego consciousness, okay, that comes about as a result of the ego's mastery of instinctuality, okay? Self-mastery, right? You do not have to dig too deeply to recognize this image of Mithras reaching for Sol's crown and Sol kneeling before Mithras. It is an image of modern man and his achievements that have grown out of his rational, secular attitude. Rational secularism has no other God except the human ego, and this is an image of it. Sol kneeling before Mithras, you know, and what they're talking about here is like science, you know, the way that we've created God in our own image, actually, if you think about it, you know, all the products of our culture, the best products of our culture that have been used and reused and built upon and rebuilt upon over time, these staple products, okay? That's what wheat is. With people don't think about the product of the Heros Gamos or the Holy Marriage, you know, which we're talking about here in this stage where Mithras is brought to a higher level with Sol, right? And that's pronounced, okay? Wheat is the child of the Heros Gamos. This is the Heros Gamos, or the conjunctio of opposites, man and animal, but they're actually one, okay? And that self-sacrifice produces the wheat, we can say, or that's also another hidden symbol of the Holy Spirit. Now, this is the thing. This wheat, think about in your day-to-day life. Without wheat, all people would starve, all people would die. Anything that you eat has wheat in it for the most part. Crackers, bread for your sandwiches, your oats, you know, are some type of grain, if you will. There are a whole lot of things that we're rely upon as it comes to these farm products, okay? And it's really just talking about these crowning achievements of society, you see? So let us continue, okay? Before I get lost here, okay? So I want to bring attention to the fact that this is obviously a four-scheme schemata, but various others do exist which swap the arrangement. Also, the fifth arrangement in this arrangement would be the introduction / Mithras transformation into Aeon, which will be covered at length later in this lecture. I also speak about it quickly in the beginning of this lecture, okay, which is what we're doing right here. So I chose to utilize these images, okay, because not only have they been well thought out, but they are widely focused upon in this type of arrangement. However, more could be added in order to accommodate the formula, okay, and which just images which basically just exist in the whole canon. It's kind of like when you look at images of the Rosarium Philosophorum, we usually receive 10 images of the Rosarium Philosophorum, but there are actually 20, okay? Most people have only talked about 10 of those images, okay? So we're using one that is going to give you a really nice system to use if it speaks to you, if it resounds with you, okay? So nevertheless, the fifth portion of this, like Mithras transformation into Aeon, which we will approach later in this lecture, will be spoken on copiously, okay? Because it's really important. This fifth station or fifth post in the pictures of the Myth of Mithras, right, is also, since we mentioned the Rosarium Philosophorum, it's basically equivalent to the 10th picture of the Rosarium Philosophorum, the resolving of the stone, basically, okay? So let us continue. So I'm going to go through these posts again, and we're going to talk more about these basically from a psychological angle first, and then we're going to get into another angle of these, which will basically talk about the sacrificial symbolism in Mithraism, okay? So the first scene is the emergence into the world via the mother and libido symbols. And that's either the stone or the tree, because in some versions of the myth, Mithras is born from a stone. He's said to be saxogenous, which is born from a stone, okay? And they call that the Petra Genetrix, the mother rock, basically, okay? And the second imagery that we're going to use is the slaying of the bull after wrestling with it, and that basically equals the struggle between spirit and matter, creation / light vanquishing darkness, order being made out of chaos, okay? And then the third post is self-mastery, dining with the sun god. The eating of food represents coagulatio, action, deed, outcome, becoming due to action, basically, right? Assimilation of ego by self. And this is the successful version. Unsuccessful is when you're not being conscious of what's happening. You get basically swallowed up into a mood or some type of preclusive attitude that ends up wreaking havoc on days ahead and situations in your life, And this is because of a psychological complex, basically. You've repressed it. It's tried to make itself known to you, but you don't want to wrestle with the bull. You don't want to slay it, and you're not going to do it. So it starts to get out of the stall and wreak havoc, okay? So the fifth position is similar to the third in that it has, or the fourth position rather, is similar to the third in that it has direct implications of mastery. Yet this is a solid confirmation that is a surety to the soul, basically a panacea for the original sickness of Zorvan's doubt, which we'll talk about Zorvan's doubt and like how important that doubt was, because that doubt actually led to the creation of the opposites. You see what I'm saying? So we'll get into that, okay? The fifth portion of this myth is the transformation into Zorvan, which is limitless time, the god of limitless time. That's Aeon, that's Cronus, that's also the Hebrew word olam, which is eternity. Okay, so this is the fifth one is transformation into Zorvan, transcendence, ultimate union with the divine, cementing / solidification of eternality. This is also the permanence of recognition, that permanent feeling when you get recognized for some grand achievement that actually sets you in stone in your respective field or circle of influence. And this is what we're trying to all get to. We're all trying to reach for this permanence and have our name etched in stone throughout all time. And this is what this heroic grand legend is actually about, okay? And we're all living it out, and we're all actually making grand achievements, even to the fifth level of this mythology, in a lot of ways and a lot of things that we're doing. And the thing is sometimes we don't know the impact that we're making. You know what I mean? But if we knew what the process was, we would actually know how to continue to make our choices and to measure our choices in such a way that in the end we're going to get a grand result. Okay, so let us continue on. Now this portion that I'm going to read here is relative to the second post, the second of 5 we just spoke about in the Myth of Mithras, which is called the Transitus. We just talked about this, okay? And I'm basically going to do this in order to further frame what the Myth of Mithras is about. You know, I'm going to tell you what I told you. I'm going to tell it to you again, and I'm going to tell it to you again. That way, it can the information, you're going to walk away with it concreted in your mind, okay? So here we go. In Mithraism, a religion that sprang up not long before Christianity, we find a special set of sacrificial symbols, and it would seem a corresponding ritual, which unfortunately is known to us only from dumb monuments that don't speak their secrets anymore, because people really have to understand the symbols, these archaeologists and psychologists, etc., and they have to, just like the old alchemists of old, they have to project their knowledge of symbolism, their knowledge of mythology onto these things in order to get an understanding back from these monuments, okay? So there is a transitus with Mithras carrying the bull, a bull sacrifice for seasonal fertility. A stereotype representation of the sacrificial act, okay? Flanked on either side by dataphores carrying raised and lowered torches, okay? Now, I don't really speak much about the dataphores. Why? Because they're basically twin deities that represent Mithras himself, but they also represent demarcations of time within the seasons, respectively, Caudes and Catopodes, okay? One holds a torch upright, one holds a torch down pointing, okay? The one with the down pointing torch represents the equinox of winter. The one with the point holding it up represents summer, okay? So I didn't really approach those much at all in this, because we just have to understand that when we see twin deities in a mythology, what they represent is the self, and the fact that they're linked to Mithras, that they're actually miniatures of Mithras, basically show that he, even representing the conscious ego and the libido, is one with the self, who is represented by soul or God in this imagery, okay, in this mythology. So we were talking about the dataphores carrying raised and lowered torches, and a meal is present at which pieces of bread marked with crosses were laid on the table. That's the showbread. That's the host. That is the communion. This is where the Christians get communion. This actually comes from the old Dionysian rituals, you see. So and it's called the mysteries of the Eucharist. Okay, so even small bells have been found in these Mithraic steles and monuments, and these probably have some connection with the bell, which is sounded at Mass. Something to think about, okay? The Mithraic sacrifice is essentially a self-sacrifice. Okay, and I've written some notes here, and I'll share one of my personal notes with you that self-sacrifice is the center of my personal mandala image, which I received during one of the worst times in my life. Your dreams will come to you as a counterpole that will offer you some type of help when you're basically on the verge of a psychic split. You know what I mean? And that spells danger for your mental health, So the Mithraic sacrifice is essentially a self-sacrifice. Since the bull is a world bull, and that's also known as Gaveo Vedata, and was by the Persians, and was originally identical with Mithras himself. That's something to think about, okay? It's a self-sacrifice. And this equates the animal self / aspect of the psyche, right, which is symbolized by the bull, or animal desire, with the human manas, or mind principle. Yet I am beginning to see the animal nature as a subjectively felt miniature, a microcosm of the archetypal or deep unconscious macrocosm, okay? That's something to think about. I know what I'm saying here, but it would take, I think, those that are hearing to see this, because we actually have a direct link within ourselves. The groanings, the urges, the things inside of us that burn us up. These are a miniature of something higher that is trying to tell us something about what it is that we need to do and how we need to approach the unconscious, not just with inside of ourselves, because it's a mirror of also that which is without, okay? So the Mithraic transitus is a motive that corresponds to Christ carrying the cross, just as the transformation of the beast sacrifice corresponds to the resurrection of the Christian God in the form of food and drink. And I made some reference to the Hierophant, who is the priest of the exoteric mysteries, who is ATU 5, or the 5th card numbered in Roman numerals in the Greater Arcana deck in the tarot, basically using those as archetypal symbols, okay? And it indicates initiation, teaching, spiritual, social groups, and interests, usually towards the gain of politics, and that's usually what they're used towards. But you can also use these things that you're taught in these spiritual groups for self-mastery and for self-achievement, you know what I mean, for linking with your higher self, or creating that ego self axis that is much talked about in analytic psychology, okay? And even the word restaurant has the idea of Taurus in it, okay? And within the word Taurus has the ideas of a table, sacrifice, fellowship, service, nurturing, fulfilling of basic needs, basically, okay? The least thing that's shown here is safety and security, but the most are physiological needs: breathing, food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep. Here's some notes I put on some of these things, okay? We're going to continue here. The representations of the sacrificial act, the Tauroctony bull slaying, recall the crucifixion of Christ between two thieves, one of whom is raised up to paradise while the other goes down to hell. And also, too, Caudes and Caudopates, the dataphores that flank Mithras in this Tauroctony scene, also point back to that as well, though, too, And I wrote, once again, and I told you guys this earlier, seasons are intimated by those dataphores and also the thieves in the crucifixion scene. And let's go back. Seasons are intimated, and all effects which the natural state imprints upon the physical state, okay? Because if you think about it, it's springtime right now, and people are more stirred up. They're quick to express their anger. They're also more apt to chase out their physical desires, and it's really a time where you even see animals in nature doing this thing. The trees are basically having sex with one another through invisible spores that you can't see, but I guess you can smell and feel. If you have pollen allergies, you'll see mammals and birds of all types mating, engaging in intercourse, and having offspring during this time as well, too. So that's that type of energy. The opposite, which is the winter energy, is when everything goes into the ground to hibernate and things start to die off, you see. So these are very important transition posts that the myth of Mithras is showing us within the iconography, okay? So let us continue here. So we're going to get into syncretism, understanding what syncretism is, because I do a lot of it on this channel, and I hope this is the last time that I'll have to talk about it. But I really need to talk about it because you need to know why this is so important. Why? Because I'm going to tell you. So syncretism is the practice of combining different beliefs in various schools of thought. Syncretism involves the merging or assimilation of several originally discrete traditions, especially in the theology and mythology of religion, thus asserting an underlying unity and allowing for an inclusive approach to other faiths. Syncretism also occurs commonly in expressions of art and culture known as eclecticism, as well as in politics known as syncretic politics, okay? Now, I'm going to get into the nomenclature so we can get into the etymology of what syncretism is, okay? The English word is first attested in the early 17th century. It is from modern Latin syncretismus, drawing on the ancient Greek syncretismos, supposedly meaning Cretan federation. However, this is a spurious etymology from the naive idea of Plutarch's first century AD essay on fraternal love, Philadelphus, in his collection Moralia. He cites the examples of the Cretans who compromised and reconciled their differences and came together in alliance when faced with external dangers. So if you think about this metaphorically, you can probably figure out that he probably didn't mean that literally. It's like, okay, the Cretans were coming into certain dangers and things, so they're like, okay, let's come together and make this right. So it's like, yeah, when you come into dangers with your interpretations, it's a very wise thing to find out how one thing links with another, because it may come with an extra set of information that ties everything else together, okay, that you're trying to study. So it is a wise thing to do. And that is their so-called syncretism, the union of Cretans. More likely as an etymology is soon, which is with, plus kerenumai, which is mix, and its related noun, krasis, mixture, okay? So that was pretty interesting. So it's a together mixture. It's a with mixture. Okay, so syncretism tends to facilitate coexistence and unity between otherwise different cultures and worldviews, intercultural competence, a factor that has recommended it to rulers of multi-ethnic realms. Conversely, the rejection of syncretism, usually in the name of piety and orthodoxy, may help to generate, bolster, or authenticate a sense of uncompromised cultural unity in a well-defined minority or majority. All major religious conversions of populations have had elements from prior religious traditions incorporated into legends or doctrine that endure with the newly converted laity. Syncretism was common during the Hellenistic period, with rulers regularly identifying local deities in various parts of their domains with relevant gods or goddesses of the Greek pantheon as a means of increasing the cohesion of their kingdom. This practice was accepted in most locations, but vehemently rejected by the Jews, who considered the identification of Yahweh with the Greek Zeus as the worst of blasphemy. But let's think about this too. The Jews also took a lot of pagan deities from the Egyptians. There's Egyptian influence, there's Babylonian influence. So I can't really side with the verity of that last statement, because it's too evident if you understand syncretism that you'll see a lot of what is said in the Bible is ripped out of older mystery religions, you know, some of which texts are still available for reading, okay? And there are copious lectures on YouTube about this exact topic that I just side busted on, okay? The Roman Empire continued the practice first by identification of total Roman deities with Greek ones, producing a single Greco-Roman pantheon, and then identifying members of that pantheon with the local deities of various Roman provinces. Allegedly, an undeclared form of syncretism was the transfer of many attributes of the goddess Isis, whose worship was widespread in the later Roman Empire, to the Christian Virgin Mary. It's just another version of that. And I just got done saying that the Christianized religions took from Egyptology, okay? And some of the later factions that came in, even the Babylonian religions they've taken from, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that in a negative way, like, oh man, you know, they're just a bunch of biters and, you know, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. No, the baby and the bathwater in that sense are just fine for these studies here, okay? And will actually enrich your studies. So I would encourage you to use syncretism in all of your endeavors in trying to understand the deeper mysteries. You know what I mean? Sometimes you can get it from one source, but you should be looking at other sources to do what they call amplifying the subject, okay? So we're going to read a little bit more about what syncretism is and move on, okay? Why is syncretism so important? At a deeper layer of meaning, so, syncretism is the merging or blending of different beliefs, traditions, and cultural elements into a unified whole. It is in its use in analytic psychology, syncretism becomes a valuable tool for understanding the ego and self, as well as their relationships, through the exploration of analogous myths and pantheons. And this is because the gods represent energies. You can actually switch the word. Like, instead of saying God, you could say energy, God of war, energy of war. You know what I mean? And you can locate that in your psyche with by basically seeing, for instance, confrontational energy. You know what I mean? You might have an abundance of it. You might only have a little bit of it. You can search yourself through these energies. You know, they allow you vicarious ways to see within yourself, and also to survey the depths of other things as well, though, too, that you can link and pair them with. Okay, that's basically what symbology is there to help us to do. So, analytic psychology, pioneered by Carl Jung, emphasizes the exploration of the unconscious and the archetypal motifs that shape human experience. By studying myths and pantheons from various cultures, individuals gain insight into universal patterns of human behavior, symbols, and archetypes. Syncretism allows practitioners of analytic psychology and other more arcane practices such as occultism to draw connections between diverse mythological narratives, revealing underlying similarities and shared themes. This process, known as amplification, enriches understanding by providing multiple perspectives and layers of meaning, which subsequently adds an angle that one can utilize in order to interact with or manipulate the force or forces that are presently imposing their energy upon their psyche and lives. This is basically uncovering archetypes, okay, through the symbolic pattern of the mythologies, okay? You'd be like, oh, I can see this in something else over here. Oh, this is kind of like this sitcom over here. This sitcom that I watch is just like this. You know what I mean? You can find the things that you think this is just something totally new within something totally old and what people think are obsolete and antiquated, okay? So through syncretism and amplification, individuals can uncover deeper insights into the workings of the ego and self, as well as their interplay with the collective unconscious forces, wherein reside the archetypes. By exploring the diverse manifestations of archetypal motifs across different cultures, individuals gain a more comprehensive understanding of human psychology and the complexities of the human psyche. All right. So now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an overlay up that is going to show what the name Mithra and Mithras means, okay? And I would basically ask you to look around and see what some of the meanings are within this mind map. And what you'll basically see as I'm reading that I'm going to be getting to these portions of the mind map, but this may help solidify a very strong understanding of what the name means so that we can go along, so that when I'm reading and when we're getting into some of the deeper portions of this mystery, you're going to be able to already have your mind on straight as to what Mithras means, or what Mithra means, and what the energy actually is. Okay? What it actually is, because by naming the parts of it and the nuances of this energy, we're going to be able to do what they call alchemical sublimatio from here within the psyche, from here within the mind, okay? And this is going to help you with the rest of the study and do exactly what the last portion talked about, give you a myth and a system that will allow you to navigate your inner psyche-scape, if you will, okay? And will allow you to transform some of the energies as they occur and as you're able to identify them, okay? So let's go. And I'm going to put that overlay up, and please take a look at it as we follow along. I mean, as you follow along, because you're actually going to see that some of the syncretistic deities that I'm going to be talking about here are going to basically interweave with the idea of, the sun god, for instance, Apollo, Sol, Helios. We're basically going to get into the ideas of, covenant, treaty, promise. You're going to see some of these things that I've written down as they have something to do with even this first syncretistic deity that we're going to talk about, which is Samson, okay? So we're going to get into the root of the word Samson. I'm going to throw this information up on your screen, okay? So Strong's number 08121 is Shamash, or Shemesh, okay? And Strong's number 2246 in the Greek is Helios, okay? And they mean the same thing, okay? And I'm going to get into some numerics. I'm going to rattle off some stuff that some of you will understand, and you'll be able to get just a solid key that you can run with this. And I'll throw the imagery for this up on the screen so as not to leave anybody in the dark, okay? You have the sun, you have Rish, which is the name of the Hebrew letter. You have ATU or Atu 19, which is the sun. And the number for that is 200. The sun is what it means, Resh, also Shemesh. Also, Helios has the idea of the sun, sunrise, sun rising, east, the sun setting, and then west of direction, okay? Also, the sun as an object of illicit worship, openly, publicly, and this is used in other phrases, pinnacles, battlements, shields, as glittering or shining. And why pinnacles, battlements, or shields? Because we have what is called the seal of Solomon, or the Star of David, which is a shield, or it is the six-pointed star. That's a good way to bring it to your mind. It's a shield. And what is this shield? It's the conscious ego. By being conscious of something, that something that could run rampant and become autonomous no longer has power over you. Or if it does have power, the power is shortened because you have protected yourself with the psyche, which is not just a shield, it's also a sword. Okay, and a sword is double-edged. One edge is for building, one edge is for destroying and fighting battles. Okay, so getting back to Shemesh, or the root of Samson, I wrote here that Mithra, Maitreya, Surya, okay, and Surya is basically the sun. Samson, also Christ, are all solar deities. The latter mentioned, Christ is called in the Bible the Son of Righteousness. And I said S-U-N, not S-O-N, the Son of Righteousness, as it is noted in Malachi 4:2. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son, S-U-N, of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. So you see the sun associated with calves. I say note the equation of the bull with the sun, which the latter is an allusion to the Christ. Okay? And this is a triplicate equivalency. So here we go. Surya is the sun, as well as the solar deity in Hinduism. He is traditionally one of the major 5 deities in the Smarta tradition, all of who are considered as equivalent deities in the Panchayanta or Panchayatana Puja. I probably butchered that. And a means to realize Brahman, the one, the self. The sun, basically what they're saying is the sun is the way that you realize the self, Brahman or God, okay? Surya is the god of the sun and ruler of the planets. The Ruach in the Hebrew Kabbalistic system is the same thing. And it's going to come with healing in its wings. It's also referred to as Melech. The solar center is referred to as Melech, which Malakim means not just kings, but we also have Melech, meaning angel. And what are angels depicted with? Wings. And this would be an angel that has more of a human type visage, a anthropomorphic angel. I said therial. Therial is beast / man maybe, or some type of conglomerate. Okay, so this is an anthropomorphic angel. Okay, so okay, let's go to the next page. Now, this is another deity that Mithras is syncretized with, and I'm going to read some things here that will elucidate this, okay? And this deity is called Argos Panoptes. Argos Panoptes, okay? So 10,000 eyes, the story of Argos Panoptes. And I'm going to take excerpts of this. This is something written by Alexander Nikolaev, okay? And I'm just going to start reading here. The myth of Argos, or Argus, was well known in antiquity to judge from 6th and 5th century literature and art. Its basic constituents are as follows. When Io was turned into a heifer by Zeus, so we have the heifer, we have the cow, okay? The Titan Argus, which is a giant, and the Titans were the ones that were cast into Hades, okay? So this is one of them, I guess, that might have missed that event, or might have not been cast into Hades because he was used by Hera, okay? He was appointed by Hera as her guard. And who is her? They're talking about the heifer's guard, okay? And while on this duty, he was killed by Hermes. The most conspicuous and unusual feature of Argus is the number of his eyes, which in different sources range between 3 and several thousand. The purpose of this paper is to make a new suggestion regarding the origin of the motif of the myriad-eyed cowherd. So let us remind ourselves of the relevant sources. In Aisk, S-U-P-P, don't know what that is, the story of Io is treated in the Stichomythia between chorus of Danaids and Pelasgus, the king of Argos. Io's guard is mentioned at 303 through 305, the pages, right? Described as the all-seeing cowherd of one heifer. A somewhat more detailed description is in Aisk, and then Aesch, right? In her monody, Io calls Argus a myriad-eyed cowherd, and later an earth-born herdsman staring with his many eyes. Bacchylides too was familiar with the myth. In his poem about Io, he describes Argos as looking every way with tireless eyes, and as an unresting and sleepless. From the description of the battle between Argives and Thebans in blah blah blah, I'm not gonna read the numbers and stuff because it's gonna kind of mess up my reading here. We learned that in the center of Hippomedon's shield was the all-seeing Argus, with eyes dappling his body, some opening in concert with the rising stars and some closing with the setting ones. So that kind of tells you what his eyes represent was the stars. It is this image of Argus, whose entire body is covered with multiple eyes, that remains the standard and popular one in classical literature. So I just want it to be known that Mithras presides over cattle, wide pastures, has hundreds of eyes, hero and vigilance trappings in Argus and Mithra are present. Okay, we're seeing the commonalities there. All right. And I do want to reiterate that the work of Edward F. Edinger, called The Mysterium Lectures, A Journey Through C.G. Jung's Mysterium Conjunctionis, details this myth and its particular meaning very well. Okay, so that's something that you might want to look into on a side note. So the formula of Argos is reversed of that of Mithras. The former is obviously contained by the mother and dispatched to do her bidding, and is dispatched in the process, basically killed in the process. This kind of fits the theme of the doting lover who is usually a mama's boy and who is usually dispatched in some plot as the woman favors the more exciting, more high-prized lover. The former also is pushed by the mother into the position of the old treasure and maiden hoarding dragon. So that was just a little side note to kind of see this in a different way, because it doesn't really seem like, even though Argos was glorified after his being killed in the situation, it's like, okay, great, you didn't get the maiden. You were basically just kind of helping to keep somebody else from enjoying the maiden. And that's why it was turned into the form of a cow to conceal it. And you basically ended up dying for this, and you were commemorated by being the eyes on a peacock's feathers. Great. You know, I'm sorry about my my lack of enthusiasm about that, but nevertheless, let's continue on, okay? And yet this conception of Argos physiognomy is not the only one known to art historians. There are also traces of another tradition in which Argos was a Janus-type figure with 4 eyes, 2 on each of his faces. And this is very important because Mithras has to do with the number 360 and also 365. So does Janus. 365, okay? Has to do with the beginning of the year, the coming and going, because of the being the god of doors and doorways, okay? So let's continue. This is the way Argus is depicted on a black figure Attic amphora in London, dated ca 540, okay? The two-faced Argus in this is thus the earlier iconographic conception, which only rarely recurs in the 5th century, okay? So I'm going to read something that quotes the epic, it's from the Epic of Aegimius, okay? And Hera set a watcher upon her, Io, the heifer, right? Great and strong Argus was the watcher, who with 4 eyes looked every way, and the goddess stirred in him unwearying strength. Sleep never fell upon his eyes, but he kept sure watch always. And the mother or anima emboldened him for this task of standing in the way of Zeus's enjoyment. So we can look at this also too, that Mithras in his mythology is in the process of releasing himself from the grip of the mother. And after doing so, we are introduced to Aeon, who is symbolic of fate and moreover destiny. The former, who is the former is forever commemorated. The former we're talking about here is Argos, okay? Is forever commemorated by the mother in animal form. For example, he's forever made to be an example to those that would be better off to understand their instinct, which is modified in a debilitating way by religion and over-conditioning by the superego's demands. The peacock is an image of resurrection and sunrise, pride and vanity. The cebus immortalis is also what it is. It's the host in the Eucharist, this omnes colores citrinitas, which heralds the rubedo phase of alchemy. So to locate one source of pride in the self is sound practice, okay? The key in grappling with the ego is not total abasement of such, being the ego, right? But perspective as to where the weight of the pride rests. Throw it back on the self. Find out where the blame lies. Find out where the archetypal root of your struggle lies, is what this is saying, you know? But a lot of us will write off our own instincts because we've been taught to do that through religion and through just the way society has taught us, you know, to be good followers, follow your mother, follow your father, and do what they say unceasingly. No, don't do what your animal mind says. Don't even entertain those thoughts, you know? So they become something anathema. They become something forbidden. And yes, they are forbidden because by following them, by following the libido, you gain entry into the realm of the mothers, okay? Which is the unconscious. So let us continue. Here's just a little piece to read here for you guys. And that is that all available sources for the Argos Panoptes myth fall into two parts, with the 6th century sources featuring a giant with 4 eyes and 5th century sources depicting Argos with multiple eyes all over his body. And it's really important that I say something about this here because the physiological description portrays easily the 4-eyed, 2-faced man who stays. It ain't me. I'm wearing glasses, but that ain't me, okay? So stop. This physiological description portrays easily the 4-eyed man who has 2 faces, who stays with and does the bidding of his mother, who has no thought or life of his own, who physically bears this description, but also bears the intense psychological weight of the trappings of his duty. Also, it speaks of the mental condition of always being watched, always watching, paranoia, and the now telltale signs of the fruits of PTSD, okay? And usually people that have PTSD are a different type of person, okay? And I'm going to speak a little bit more of this here, right? The key to recognizing the type of people that are under the modern manifestation and sway of the Mithraic energy, right? Mars, Aries, Taurus, also Saturn symbolized, right? Are soldiers, fighters, police, fraternal orders, people that are in fraternal orders, farmers, security guards, conspiracy theories, whistleblowers, spies and their overseers, the overseers of spies, intelligence agencies, martial artists, those that war with themselves on a spiritual level, basically sincere religious adherents, and also sincere religious fanatics are some of the individuals that fall under these, under the energy of Mithras, if you will, and under that energy of Argos Panoptes. And we need to also think of this energy as an energy that may lend towards being able to to identify the typology of a psychopath. Okay? So, and that's something to think about. I could go down that rabbit hole explaining that. And I think I might get into explaining some of that later, a little bit of it though. But we have a long list here that I've given you of types of individuals that fall into this energy that are that usually are very much a part of this energy. And a lot of times these type of people have PTSD or over anxious paranoid energy, you know. It's something to think about there. Okay, on to the next one. So the names of a few Persians who visited Athens are also known, and more must have gone. Okay, because in Greece, like if you think about Argos, Panoptes, it's like, okay, how come you guys have a myth that's like the Myth of Mithras? It has the same thing going on. Where did you guys get this type of myth? It had to have come from the same place of origin, okay? So that's why I've stated this out of the 10,000 Eyes lecture by Alexander Nikolaev, okay? It is therefore not unreasonable to speculate that the discontinuity in the mythological tradition about Argos and the introduction of a clearly exotic element, myriads of eyes, might likewise be due to a Persian influence, okay? The many-eyed figure in Iranian mythology, which served as a model for the 5th century representation of Argos, could be Mithra. This deity is well established in the Iranian pantheon and is the Zoroastrians and in the Zoroastrian scriptures, the Avesta. The standing epithet of Mithra is he who has 10,000 eyes, right? And I say Alexander Nikolaev touches on exactly what I expected, which links us to possible diagnoses, which further lets us know about the type of people which frequented the Mithraism and what type of people in this day and age are equivalent to the ones we speak of now. Because I already talked about that when I was talking about soldiers having this type of energy, conspiracy theorists, people that work for the CIA, spies, different things like that. Okay, I gave a long list just a minute or so ago. Okay. All right, so on to the next portion of this. We can thus assume that the formulaic language of Mithraic worship in Achaemenid Persia was quite close to that found in the Avestan canon, and that it is possible to use Avestan texts in order to reconstruct conceptions of Persian popular religion, including the image of a myriad-eyed cowherd. Now, let us turn to the actual text that may support the hypothesis of the Iranian origin of the motif of the many-eyed cowherd. Luckily, we possess a whole hymn dedicated to Mithra, okay? And that's the Mir Yasht, Yasht number 10, right? Crucially, the Avestan analogs of both Argos epithets, which is the myriad-eyed cowherd, are found in the stanza that serves as a refrain to the entire hymn, repeated verbatim 34 times, okay? And I'm going to read it in English. We worship Mithra of wide pastures, whose words are correct, who is eloquent, who has a 1,000 ears, is well built, who has 10,000 eyes, is tall. At 10,000 eyes again, right? Is tall. Has a wide outlook, is strong, sleepless, ever awake. And being sleepless and ever awake, being vigilant is one of the main qualifiers of the heroic archetype, okay? And that's why I said security guards, law enforcement, and different people of that nature factor into and fall in here 100% perfectly. And because Mithras is also a deity that links to rebellion, we could also say that the anti-type of these individuals also has to do with Mithra as well, okay? It's one other side of that pole, okay? So He who has 10,000 eyes, and he who has or bestows wide cattle pastures, okay, were standing epithets of Mithras, and can be seen in the very beginnings of the Zoroastrian liturgy, performed daily at the morning watch, where all deities are invoked and invited to the sacrificial precinct in order to attend the yasna ceremony. The claim of this paper, according to Alexander Nikolaev, is that the image of Mithra as a god with 10,000 eyes, okay, in the religion of the Achaemenid Iran served as an inspiration for Argos Panoptes in Greek literature and art. Like Argos, Mithra is a vigilant guardian who is closely associated with cows. Mithra's vigilance is repeatedly emphasized, okay? Among things warriors request from Mithras is much watchfulness against enemies. From Yashta 10:45, so that might be the Yasht. We learn that his 10,000 eyes given to him by Ahura Mazda are on every outlook. Mithra is watching even in the dark, okay? And that kind of makes me think, because we're going to get into a portion of this lecture where we speak of Mithraic influence on Christmas, but that portion right there says Mithra is even watching in the dark. And that goes back to the Gnostic idea of the oculum piscae, which are the fish's eyes, which represent the Citrinitas portion of the 4 steps of alchemy. It's the third before the last, okay? Also, because we're going to talk about Christmas at the end of this whole thing here, probably the third lecture in this series. At the end of that, we're going to talk about Christmas. Mithra is watching even in the dark, okay? That's something that we need to think about, because isn't there that part of the song about Santa Claus that he knows when you are sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows when you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sakes, right? He's watching, okay? This is exactly what they said, and it's funny how congruent even with these older scripts, the imagery of Santa Claus, the story of Santa Claus is here, okay? So keep an eye. Now, there's something that I'm talking about within the understanding of the vigilance of Mithras, okay? Keep an eye on the desires and animal nature, the instincts, your cravings. If you can decipher the meaning behind them by categorizing them, then you can perceive the archetypal meaning and root, and then obtain self-knowledge and take part in the transformation, okay? And that's what integration is all about. So, so what we're going to do, I'm going to put a mind map up, okay? Because now that we're done with just some of the singular syncretisms for right now, within the first portion of this lecture, I'm going to go into an understanding of Mithra from various different religious sectors throughout the world, okay? And this mind map that I'm going to throw up is actually, you can use it to follow along, is basically going to talk about some of these meanings of the name Mithra, okay? So Mithra in Proto-Indo-Iranian Mithras is a name of an Indo-Iranian divinity that predates the Rig Vedic Mithra and Avestan Mithra. The names and some characteristics of these established deities subsequently influence other figures, okay? And some of those figures include, these are syncretized with the deity aforementioned Mithra, right? Maitreya, a Vridi-derived form of Sanskrit Mithra, a bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition. Latin Mithras, the principal figure of the 1st century Roman mystery cult of Mithraism, whose name derives from the Avestan theonym via Greek and some Anatolian intermediate. In Hellenistic era Asia Minor, Avestan Mithra was conflated with various local and Greek figures, leading to several different variants of Apollo, Helios, Mithras, Hermes, Stilbon. In Middle Iran, the Avestan theonym evolved among other Middle Iranian forms into Sogdian, Misi, Middle Persian, and Parthian Mir, or Mayer, and Bactrian Miuro, which is Miru. Aside from Avestan Mithra, these derivative names were also used for Greco-Bactrian, Mithro, Miro, Mioro, and Miuro. Mithra, the first messenger of Iranian Manichaeans, is another one here, okay? So in the Indian religious texts, both Vedic Mithra and Avestan Mithra derive from an Indo-Iranian common noun Mithra, generally reconstructed to have meant covenant, treaty, agreement, promise. This meaning is preserved in Avestan Mithra, covenant. In Sanskrit and modern Indo-Iranian languages, Mithra means friend, one of the aspects of bonding and alliance. Herein can be seen why the conjunctio and its chemical operation in catalysis can be seen as mirrored here in the etymology of Mithra, okay? Because you're trying to get things to bond and to create a product in a quicker amount of time than normally it would happen, okay? So it's almost like they're coming together in marriage or as friends, okay? The Indo-Iranian reconstruction is attributed to Christian Bartholomew and was subsequently refined by A. Millet, 1907, who suggested derivation from the Proto-Indo-European root may, which is to exchange. And that's like a mercurial idea right there, exchanging between one another, bartering, doing business. So this kind of links Mithras with a mercurial idea, okay? A suggested alternative derivation was meh, to measure, okay? So it is a way of measuring the celestial sphere space, because you got to keep in mind that Mithra, as the conscious mind is always cutting things up and measuring them. That's the faculty of the left brain. The right brain sees things holistically as one viscous fluid motion, you see, as one whole. And the left brain, which Mithras represents, and also he has the sword, or the knife, which is the weapon of separatio, discrimination, right? So we see that there, okay? Millet said that it's mei, which means to bind, combining the root may with the tool suffix tra, which means that which causes binding, for instance, okay? Also found in mantra, that which causes to think. Then it literally means that which binds. So, and he also binds the bull as far as when he wrestles it, when he comes into conscious cognitive awareness that he's basically putting his finger on the part of his animal essence that is raging out of control, and he does the act of self-sacrifice to make his equation with soul and transformation into aeon, okay? So let's continue here. Let's continue. Okay, so this name also means mei, the root mei, has the idea of covenant, treaty, agreement, promise, oath, etc. Okay? That which measures as well needs to be thrown in there. Pokorny's interpretation also supports to fasten or strengthen, which may be found in the Latin moenia, city, wall, fortification. And in an antonymic form, Old English ge meere, which means border or boundary post, okay? We also see the idea of religious piety in this word, because present-day Sanskrit Mitra means friend, and New Persian mir means love or friendship, okay? Let's also look at... So I'm going to read some more excerpts here on that will help us to understand the name and some of the function of Mithras, okay? The Greco-Roman individuals that were Mithras probably thought that his name meant mediator, okay? And we can also look at and see that the name in the summary of the Zoroastrian religion, Mithra, is a meson, meaning in the middle, between the good Ormazdes and the evil Aramanius. Now, we got to think about this too. Zorvan, who we are going to talk about later, who is now we see is syncretized with Mithra, because in Zorvanism, Zorvan was also a meson, basically an intermediate between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, respectively Ormazd and Aramanus, okay? And also, too, it says, and this is why the Persei call the mediator Mithras. Zahner attributes this false etymology to a role that Mithras and the sun played in the now extinct branch of Zoroastrianism known as Zorvanism. And we can't say that it's erroneous, because this too was a mythology that existed around the time when this stuff was coming up. You know what I mean? And it was one of the last, from what I've been told and from what I studied about on Zorvanism, it was one of the last forms of Mithraism to kind of get stomped out and to disappear, you know? So the Indian Mithra, Vedic Mithra, is a prominent deity of the Rig Veda, distinguished by a relationship to Varuna, the protector of Rata, as described in Rata or Arta is truth, okay? As described in hymn 2, Mandala 1 of Rig Veda. Together with Varuna, he counted among the Adityas, a group of solar deities, also in later Vedic text. Vedic Mithra is the patron deity of honesty, friendships, contracts, and meetings, okay? Okay, so in Zoroastrianism, Mithra is a member of the Trinity of Ahuras, protectors of Asha Arta, which is truth, or that which is right. Mithra's standard appellation is of wide pastures, suggesting omnipresence. Mithra is truth-speaking, with 1,000 ears, with 10,000 eyes, high with full knowledge, strong, sleepless, and ever awake. And that's Yasht 10:7. We just got done reading that in the last portion that we were studying, that we were going over here. As preserver of covenants, Mithra is also protector and keeper of all aspects of interpersonal relationships, such as friendship and love. Relation to his position as protector of truth, Mithra is a judge, Ratu, ensuring that individuals who break promises or are not righteous, Artavan, they call those, are not admitted to paradise. Okay? And it's another thing to know, Mithra is closely associated with the feminine Yazada Aradevi Sura Anahita, the hypostasis of knowledge, and that's said to be his wife, okay? And that's like a Sophia type figure, really, when you think about it. If you understand Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, from the Gnostic perspective. And that's also the highest version of a man's anima, okay? So let's look at this here. This whole thing basically is a direct hit on Mithras, Syncretism with Argos, Panoptes, and more. Note that this aspect of Mithras is the aspect which soldiers, officers, guards, etc. share in common. Watchfulness. Okay, that's what they share in common. You know, watchfulness, being guards, being heroic, okay? But also they share PTSD and paranoid ideations in many cases. And I'm talking about myself included in this estimation, okay? So let us see to, so on to the next portion. So Mithra and Commagene, I'm just going to read real quickly. 1st century BC evidence from Commagene demonstrates the reverence paid to Mithras, but does not refer to the mysteries, okay? In the colossal statuary erected by King Antiochus at Mount Nimrut, Mithras is shown beardless, wearing a Phrygian cap, and was originally seated on a throne alongside other deities and the king himself. On the back of the throne, there is an inscription in Greek which includes the name Apollo, Mithras, Helios. So this conflates the sun with Mithras, okay? Or the sun god, the self, with Mithras, which represents the smaller version of the sun, the ego, okay? The conscious ego. The Buddhist Maitreya, let's talk about that. Maitreya is sometimes represented seated on the throne and venerated both in Mahayana and non-Mahayana Buddhism. Some have speculated that inspiration for Maitreya may have come from the ancient Iranian deity Mithra. The primary comparison between the two characters appears to be the similarity of their names. According to Thiel, 1917, no one who has studied the Zoroastrian doctrine of the Saoshants or the coming savior prophets can fail to see their resemblance to the future Maitreya. I mean, it's right there, really. Paul William claims that some Zoroastrian ideas like the Saoshant influenced the beliefs about Maitreya, such as expectations of a heavenly helper, the need to opt for positive righteousness, the future millennium, and universal salvation. Possible objections are that these characteristics are not unique to Zoroastrianism, nor are they necessarily characteristic of the belief in Maitreya. Okay? So this is what syncretism does. It's like, it's not, like irresolutely connected to, the Buddhist Maitreya. The Mithras is just connected 100% to that. It's a make or break. No, this is the idea of syncretism. I'm showing you how this works just by this demonstration here, okay? So now we're here at the Greco-Roman Mithras, okay? The name Mithra was adopted by the Greeks and Romans as Mithras, a chief figure in the mystery religion of Mithraism. At first identified with the sun god Helios by Greeks, the syncretic Mithras Helios was transformed into the figure Mithras during the 2nd century BC, probably at Pergamon. This new cult was taken to Rome about 1st century BC and was dispersed throughout the Roman Empire. Popular among the Roman military, Mithras was spread as far north as Hadrian's Wall and the Germanic limes. Wowee. It's like they were really taking over. Really, really taking over. Okay. So we're going to get into this last portion here. And we're really almost done for this first portion. And this is already 1 hour and 30 minutes. So we'll see what we get to when we kind of cut this down, but it's all really much needed to be said. If you can follow what I'm putting down, I'm not the best vessel. Don't kill the messenger. But if you can follow what I'm laying down here, you're gonna find that you have a system of self-transformation, a very simple system that you can basically take the steps and project them onto the imagery. If you know the imagery will help you learn these posts that the psyche goes through in the cyclical process of transformation and individuation. It's not done just one time and for all. It's a continual process, and it helps you to know where you are, okay? So I'm basically going to put up this map on what is called in Hebrew the Ruach HaKodesh. And that is the Holy Spirit, okay? None other than the Holy Spirit. It's also referred to as the Ruach Elohim, okay? And as I am speaking about this Ruach Elohim, the Holy Spirit, okay, I want you to understand that I'm talking about this so you can understand more about what the gift of the Tauroctony is, what the gift of the conjunctio is. And the conjunctio is also the crucifixion of Christ. It is also Samson, when he was made to, push the mill like an animal after killing all these individuals in his journeys and becoming the hero that he is or was in the myths, right? his eyes were put out, and he was meant to do the job of a beast of burden, cattle, okay? And a boy, and when they say a boy, a lot of times they're speaking of Mercury, who basically helps you to find the way out of no way, helps you to find the gateposts or the posts that hold the city up so you can topple it if you're a hero, a warrior like Samson, you see. And this is basically what Samson does. He sacrifices himself. The sacrificer becomes the sacrifice, which is actually the formula of this whole system here in a large way, okay? So please follow along with me on the mind map. It will actually help you to understand what this energy of Mithras is going to bring when the sacrifice is actually made, what the energy turns into, okay? Okay. So, we're going to get into this material pertaining to the Holy Spirit, okay? And this is basically the gift that appears once again after the Tauroctony. This is the equivalent symbology once again of the grain, the seed, the blood, the semen, the sacrifice, the semen of the bull, rather, and then the bull sacrifice, which becomes the stuff of the new world creation or the renewed creation, okay? And life. And it's also the point of origin of the staple products of culture. And it just makes me think of that statement in scripture that says, man cannot live by bread alone, but by every word which proceeds from the mouth of God, okay? For example, the Tauroctony self-transformation yields nourishment for the body, yes, right? But it is also verily the building blocks of a community, right? Just like a church. The sacrifice of Christ is the main building block of the community of the church. The stone which was rejected has become the chief cornerstone, right? So the spiritual food, it's the spiritual food that fortifies the receiver in wisdom, revelation, guidance, and also inspiration, okay? So the word ruach is what we're going to look at, which is breath, wind, spirit. That's what it means, okay? And, breath, wind, and spirit, it serves as these alone, yet we are looking at this in the train of the word Holy Spirit, where this singularly would be the ruach, the six-pointed star, the ruach Elohim, which is the spirit of the gods, plural, okay? Or the ruach HaKodesh, and it is triangular. It's the third personage of the Trinity, and it also has an equivalency to 3.1415, which is pi. It's circular, okay? It's also circular, okay? And it means wind, breath, exhalation, life. It has some meanings that represent anger, because when we talked about Samson, the Spirit of the Lord fell upon him, and then he was able to slaughter all of his enemies, right? We have the idea also of unsubstantiality, basically a region of the sky, and the spirit. Okay. Let's go to the other page. So now we're going to talk about the word Kodesh. Okay, and Kodesh is apartness, sacredness, being set apart, and by overcoming. He who overcomes is one of the chosen ones. It talks about that in Revelations, one that overcomes through the trial and the tribulation period. And we're constantly going through many apocalypses within inside of ourselves. So this isn't just talking about physical eschatological times, which we're actually going to brush on further into this lecture because of the old red heifer sacrifice that's going on in Israel right now, because of the conflation of even the bull of sacrifice in this ideology with the moon, and with the eclipsing of the moon as well, though, too. With Christ's crucifixion on the cross and darkness spreading over the land because of eclipse, earthquakes. Actually, there were two major earthquakes that happen in different parts of the world around this time as well. Coincidences? Yeah, you might say, but I think not. And we'll get into it, okay? So, but also the meaning of the word Kadesh is a secret place, a thing, and a sanctity, a holiness, okay? Strong concordance, it basically means a consecrated thing, dedicated thing, hallowed thing, holiness, most holy day, portion, thing, basically a saint. And it's from Kadash, which means a sacred place or thing, sanctity, consecrated thing, dedicated thing, hallowed thing, holiness, holy, saint, sanctuary, okay? And when I say Ruach HaKodesh, or the HaKodesh in that is explained here, and it reminds me of the idea of remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, okay? The Holy Spirit is analogous to Saturn, Binah, and Saturn is analogous to Saturday. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, right? And this is in the Kabbalistic system, okay? Saturn indicates also Deat in the Kabbalistic system, and it also indicates Aeon, Chronos, and Zorvan as endless time. And this refers to the fifth stage of the Tauroctony myth as well. You know, you'll actually see in that first diagram that I put up to introduce the stages of the Tauroctony imagery, you're going to see that this Saturnian essence of endless time actually encompasses this whole Tauroctony image from the beginning of it to the end. Because, like, for instance, who gives Mithras the knife anyways? Who puts Mithras to this duty anyways? You know what I mean? Some would say Mercury. Some stories, it's Mercury in the myth that does it. But some stories, and the one I like the best, is where Saturn gives him the sickle or the knife to do the sacrifice with. You see what I'm saying? And if you think about it, that's in the beginning of the sacrifice, and then afterwards, after the equation with Saul, etc., you have the transformation or the revelation of the stele of Aeon, okay? And we already see here that Mithra is equivalent to this deity.
The highest secret of the mysteries, according to Kumon, is the identity of Mithras as the Leoncephalus, a lion head figure with two sets of wings and cloven feet, standing on a globe with two intersecting circles and entwined by a serpent. The imagery is a combination of the creatures of Ezekiel's vision of the throne of God, ultimately reserved for the highest ranking members of the mysteries and representing the ultimate mystery. The Leoncephalus represented Saturn, who was equated with Mithras, Zervan and Ahriman, Phanes and Hades, the god of the underworld, all as one god.
I'm just recapitulating something that I found to be a congruence in the syncretistic myth of Zorvan, Aeon, Kronos, and Mithras, and that they just totally coincide. But anyways, let us continue. Now, I want to get into one of the uses of the word the Holy Spirit, right? Now, and check this out, okay? Isaiah 63:10. But they rebelled and vexed his Holy Spirit. So there's an idea of anger, and therefore he was turned to be their enemy, and he fought against them. Okay, so that's an idea of how it's used, and we did remember that anger, that righteous, holy anger of Samson, for instance, is referenced in the term Ruach HaKodesh, okay, or Ruach Elohim, all right? So now we're going to get into, it's going to look like it's a sidebar, and this is the last of this, okay? It's going to look like it's a sidebar, but it's really not too far of a sidebar because we're still going into the mind state of syncretism. And I need to basically give you a very concise version of the dismemberment myth of Osiris, okay? Because this is going to talk about the sacrifice of the bull, and which is also Mithra sacrificing himself, the self-sacrifice, Christ dying on the cross, and then what happens after. A tremendous gift that is poured out over mankind, which in the Christian myth is the Holy Spirit, okay? So I'm going to start reading here, okay? And I'm just going to start at the third image because we want to get into just the dismemberment of Osiris and then what happens after that, okay? So, and this is the encoding that I want you to follow on this portion of what I'm going to read to make the similarity between the Osiris dismemberment myth and the Tauroctony itself, okay? The encoding of the Mithraic Tauroctony and its meaning has this type of point-to-point thing that goes on, okay? There is a assimilation of powerful unconscious contents, right, that lead to a miracle, and that is the movement of the Holy Spirit, okay? I'm keeping it really simple here, all right? So we're going to start at the third image of this, okay? Osiris needs to be referenced here now, okay? As the third image is that of being embedded in the tree. Didn't we see that with Mithras? He was embedded in a tree, born from a tree, okay? And we'll be talking about hamadryads, who are life forces and essences that are embodied in trees, okay? And they play tricks on human beings, et cetera, you know? It's basically showing libido and life force in a tree. That's what we see when we bring in a Christmas tree at Christmas time. We're experiencing this life in a tree during a time where every other tree around us is dead. Okay, so that's something to think about. So the third image in the myth of Osiris's dismemberment is that of being embedded in the tree. That associates with the imagery of the column, the pillar in Egypt. It would be called the Jed pillar. The Egyptian obelisk is another version of the same symbolism, okay? The fourth image is dismemberment. This is what we want to get to, okay? Because as it deals with Mithra and his connection with the bull, all right? It is a solutio image in which Isis collects Osiris and puts him back together again. She performs first the embalming ceremony. She is the first embalmer, creating an immortal body out of the broken mortal remains of Osiris. And keep in mind, when they made reference to alchemical solutio, that's a water operation in alchemy, and also too is mortificatio, which is the beginning of the creation of culture products such as wine, such as yogurt, etc., okay? So the fourth image is a dismemberment. It is a solutio image in which Isis collects Osiris and puts him back together again, okay? She performs the first embalming ceremony. She's the first embalmer, creating an immortal body out of the broken mortal remains of Osiris. It kind of makes you think about the seed and what Christ was made to say about the seed, in that nobody, actually it might have not been Christ, it might have been Paul exposing this mystery, where he says that we don't know what the seed of a plant that is sown will basically be, what body it will come into, you know, and such it is with the resurrection of the dead. We don't know what the body will be. It's sown in corruption and will be raised in incorruption, okay? So let's continue. Okay, the myth as a whole is a transformation mystery, okay? Which that's alchemical mortificatio, a transformation mystery, okay? It is a symbolic description of the transformation process, because Osiris is reconstituted, and then with his wooden phallus, he conceives a son, because his phallus was cut off or bit off by a certain type of fish, basically. I think it was the jed fish, they call them. And some would say that it was a crab, okay? And I'm not going to go off on this sidebar. Don't laugh at me either, okay? So here we go. Let's see, something new and redemptive. So on this note of him conceiving a son, something new and redemptive from the lost, destroyed, and replaced libido symbol. The message of ATU or ATU 18, the moon has much to bear on this, as the lobster or crayfish equals the emergence of a new archetypal energy. And keep in mind, the crab, which is also the lobster, you could say, or which is also the fish, which is in the water in this emblematic rendering of this archetypal energy, okay, of Pisces. And I'm going to show this to you on the screen, can very much serve for the new God image that is about to arise from the concrete to the spiritual, okay? So this is kind of a crude expression for the idea that the creative libido has shifted from the concrete, physical, biological level of functioning, as I said, to the psychic, symbolic level, okay? And I'm going to throw up once again the 18th card of the tarot called the moon. This is what this largely represents, okay, on a very high level. The symbolic image is a creative entity rather than the flesh and blood of the organ. It is an expression of the death and rebirth archetype that, when it completes itself, transforms libido from one level to another. Something really to think about there, okay? Because this is giving you the underpinnings of the dynamo of this energy that we're trying to harness, understand from point to point in our life, so that we can actually make higher transformation of this psychic energy within ourselves, okay? So now I'm going to talk about what the image of dismemberment means in dreams and also in this Osiris myth of dismemberment, okay? So I'm going to read this. It says, you will encounter all these various images in dreams now and then. Dismemberment, for example, is not at all uncommon in dreams. Whenever that happens, you should immediately think of the Osiris myth. That image also shows up in alchemy. An example from the alchemical treatise called The Splendor of Solace shows a man with a sword who has just dismembered a body. It is quite an ugly picture, and dreams not infrequently have rather ugly images like this. But in the majority of cases, they do not refer to grisly murderous impulses in the unconscious. Rather, it is the unconscious as a piece of nature describing what is happening to an unconscious complex. It is being dismembered by the discriminating sword of consciousness, that's the knife that Mithras holds in his hand. So the complex could be the bull. Very wisely put, actually. It should be looked at as that. And as he's dismembering this thing with the discriminating sword of consciousness, right, he's undergoing the process of assimilation. We see this bodily in the imagery of the Tauroctony. And we also experience this in the pains of the psyche as we're going through the Negredo portion of the alchemical process in our psychology, okay? Dismemberment as an image then orderly refers to the process of assimilation of a complex. You do have to pay some attention to the affective tone that is in the image. It's a self-sacrifice. You're literally cutting off a piece of yourself, but you're not cutting it off in the idea of repressing it, but nipping it in the bud. You're basically facing the dragon, slaying it so you can get the boon, get the woman, get the gold, and move forward with your life from an increased point of view, a higher informed point of view, because what's ended up happening is by doing so, you're strengthening your link with the ego self axis, or the link that is called the ego self axis is your link between the ego and the self, the link between your conscious mind and God. So you're receiving revelation, you're receiving insight, you're receiving divine influence, you're receiving the power for divine force in action, courage, you know, and sometimes it's a righteous anger that you receive from this source, you know. It's the power of manifestation. It's the rousing of the mood state to physical action. It's the power of ecstasy leading to prophecy. It's the power that through love or strife leads you to seek unity, you know? So these are things that I put on that map called the Ruach HaKadosh, the mind map, or the Ruach Elohim, okay? But it corresponds directly to what we're talking about right here. Now, I'm basically going to conclude this first portion of this lecture, and just look forward to most likely 2 other portions of this lecture coming out, and they're right behind this if you found this insightful, and we'll just continue forward on the topics on the lecture notes, okay? Thanks again for listening. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like it. If you want to share it, please share it to somebody that will benefit from it. And please subscribe. And above all else, I hope that you've been enriched by this little publication here. And until the next video, please enjoy here, okay? Thank you and goodbye.